Hey, it's Pete. I watched a great Michael K. Vaughan video today on a subject that keeps coming up. Should we really separate the art from the artist? By Michael K. Vaughan. You should definitely watch it. It's very short, it's very intelligent. He made this video because he kind of changed his outlook on how he feels about this whole subject a bit. Uh, uh, in terms of separating the idea of the art from the artist, which is when you have a artist who has done problematic things or held problematic views, and the ones that mostly come up these days are racism in the past or kind of some kind of sexual essay assault accusations in the present. But there's also been writers who've murdered people. I talk about William Burroughs a lot, who shot his wife in a William Tell game. He put a wine glass on her head and ended up shooting her in the head, and he did not pay any. And this was in Mexico in the 50s. He did not pay any penalty for that. In fact, it was kind of used to market him later on. He didn't, there was mostly it would be at least manslaughter, I would think. I don't know if money changed hands or what, but it was ruled an accidental death, and uh, um, and at a time, and maybe there's a bit of a corrective going on, because there was a time when writers were almost promoted for their bad behavior. Think of Burroughs, like I just mentioned, and also being a lifelong heroin addict, and uh, Norman Mailer is one who had really chaotic personal life, and it was kind of promoted. There was this kind of this, and Hemingway and other people. There was kind of this sort of romanticization of people's bad behavior. You have nobody seemed to mind very much that if certain French writers uh, were very anti-Semitic, or were very or were child molesters. Frankly, I can think of a couple from the 19th century. And Michael, in his analysis, does well. For one thing, he does like the most brilliant 3 or 4 minute thumbnail analysis, literary analysis of H.P. Lovecraft and how H.P. Lovecraft's racism informed his writing and made him and kind of produced the stories that he produced. You've got to see this; it's brilliant. And a lot of people don't want to read Lovecraft because of his racism, which I can understand. I think they're selling themselves short by treating dead writers like they might treat people they know alive today. Now, what I want to stress is what I'm not saying is what a lot of really irritating people will say and try and make excuses for these behaviors that these writers have behaved in. Like, you'll see a lot of people, not so much anymore, but you used to see people say, well, they'd hand wave Lovecraft's anti-Semitism, saying, well, everybody was anti-Semitism right then, back then, and which is not accurate. Probably most Jewish people weren't anti-Semitic, for one thing. For another, uh, Lovecraft was very, very deeply anti-Semitic and racist. He really, as were some other people, but not everyone. There has to be a distinction drawn between people who kind of went along with the stereotypes of the time. You can find stereotypical uh, depictions of non-white people in a lot of pulps. That's not necessarily the same thing as writing letters, having a whole ideology of white supremacy. there was just a lot of people that were ignorant of things that we're no longer ignorant of. And in the future, there will be people who are will see things that we are not even aware of today that they won't believe that we were so ignorant of. So just what I wanted to add, and then he talks about Neil Gaiman too, which I should probably refrain, but I'm not going to, from patting myself on the back again as a person who never really liked Neil Gaiman's work. But I do have kind of a point to make about that, because his work to me always seemed, he comes up with great premises. His work always seemed kind of false and superficial to me. I tried to read Stardust. I tried to read the Sandman stories. I tried to read American Gods. They all had great premises, but he seemed to be very sort of superficial, false kind of writer to me. He wouldn't really play out these premises. He wouldn't really do much with them. He would just kind of ramble on, and I always thought he was kind of a fake. And thinking back now, maybe I was just jealous because everybody I know loves Neil Gaiman. I only had one friend in my science fiction reading group who also didn't like him, and we'd be both like put our hands on each other's shoulders, just stay strong. This will pass. People are going to see that this is not a good writer. But thinking back on his work now that I tried to read at the time, and knowing what I know about those allegations against him, which some people will say, well, they don't, he hasn't been arrested for anything, so there's really nothing there, which is another kind of excuse making if you want to go into reading what the allegations actually are. I don't believe in, I don't believe you have to commit a crime or be convicted of a crime to have demonstrated bad behavior. But to me, the kind of his presentation, his persona, his public persona, it's all black, the rock star kind of look and everything, and the very performative liberal politics and male feminism, it makes sense based on the kind of way I always looked at his fiction. So that kind of goes into what Michael was saying about how you can't separate the art from the artist. And he says he had tried to in the past. He was not able to. And he kind of, in the past, Michael kind of promoted this idea of separating the art from the artist, but realized if he's honest with himself that he can't do it. And, I have the same kind of reaction with the only living artist who I think I really liked a lot, who's been canceled or has been exposed as doing things that were unsavory, would be Woody Allen. It's not a book, but, well, although he's a novelist now, I don't know if people in the United States know that. This is maybe kind of interesting too. He wrote a novel, I think last year or the year before. It was very widely promoted when I was in Spain. It was in front of every bookstore. I don't know if it got the same kind of reaction in the United States. They're a little different in Europe about some of these sexual things. Obviously, they still protect Roman Polanski to this day. But it does inform the way I look at Woody Allen's films, knowing what I know about him now. But I'm probably getting too far afield. I don't want to talk about everybody's crimes, because what I really wanted to add to the conversation was, and maybe if people have a feeling about this too, is what's going on with people that they are, is it a parasocial thing? Leaving aside the money about part of it for a moment, because some of these writers are dead, so the money doesn't come into it. For me, I really don't think the money ever comes into it. If Neil Gaiman wrote a book that I want to read, and the only way I could get it would be to buy it, I would probably buy it. I probably wouldn't buy it because I don't want to read Neil Gaiman, but if a new Woody Allen movie came out, I would probably want to see it because I want to see what he's doing. But everything I watch by him is informed by what I know about his personal life, from the Mia Farrow documentary and from other things. So, so if I bought the next Neil Gaiman book, he would get $2. So he would have 40 million and $2 instead of $40 million. But I understand people don't want to even do like, give a penny to writers that they, or to artists that have done things they don't approve of. And in the past, of course, you can make the opposite argument. The one argument is that, well, these past writers can't profit, but you can also make the argument that a writer like H.P. Lovecraft, if you're against everything he stands for, if you're against his racism, which I think hopefully we all are against his racism, by buying new editions of Lovecraft books, or you're somehow keeping him prominent in the canon. And I know there are people in the science fiction field, less, who definitely want him removed from the canon. That was kind of an issue a few years ago. But there's no serious Lovecraft critic or who doesn't acknowledge Lovecraft's racism. No biographer, no critic hand waves like some fans used to do about, well, that's just how people were back then. No, they all like S.T. Josie and other people like that, they all take that part of Lovecraft's character into their interpretations of his work. You also have to take in the fact that he was married to a Jewish woman. Some racists, it's not unheard of for racists to be married or in relationships with the races that they're against. It's an odd phenomenon, but I think it's worth thinking about and studying. Patricia Highsmith, another anti-Semite, one of my favorite writers. I read a whole biography on her that was just all the negative parts of her personality. I got it because it was shorter. There was 2 biographies that came out. She did some terrible things. She held some terrible beliefs, and she wrote letters to the press, denouncing Judaism. She tried to make life worse for Jews. She came out into a dinner party she was having, and she got in an argument about Judaism, and she came out, this is probably in the 70s, 60s, 70s, she'd written like serial numbers, like concentration camp serial numbers on her arm to mock people. Just really reprehensible behavior. And she had some other difficult behaviors. Her longest term relationship was with a Jewish woman. So what's that about? It's something to think about. It's something you have to think about when you read these people's work. Another thing we do these days, I think of Harlan Ellison in this as an example of this, who many people in the science fiction community just despise now, consider just very sexist, and a lot of it's based on his personality. There was an incident at a few years before he died, 10 years maybe before he died, we grabbed the breast of Connie Willis on stage at an event. I was there for that event, but I didn't see that part because I got nauseous and I had to leave. I got nauseous because of the air and stuff, so I missed that. I missed that big hullabaloo, but I did see a clip of it later, and Connie Willis was kind of like, they have this kind of goofy little, science fiction writers can be very cringe in public. But they were on stage about to give out the awards, and she's treating him like a child. She's got her arm around him, talking down to him like, now, Harlan, you have to behave. And he's got his thumb in his mouth. And then he reaches over and squeezes her breast, and which was too far. He took it too far. She got offended. He apologized to her apparently outside, but it really kind of wrecked his reputation in the field with, and this is a man who was always kind of a bully. He had an outsized personality, and he kind of played that up, I think, going back to the mid-century, 20th century writer thing of Norman Mailer, a good marketing thing, just to be out of control, temperamental artist type guy. but he had marched with Martin Luther King in Selma. He had advocated very strongly for and even received death threats for doing so, for advocating for the Equal Rights Amendment in the 70s. Put a whole boycott program together of the state of Arizona, um, to try and get them to pass the Equal Rights Amendment. He was a person of the left, but it didn't matter because he had done this offensive thing, and you could argue that um, his personal behavior trumps his ideology, as it does with Neil Gaiman, who's like very outspoken about liberal causes and stuff, but obviously in his personal life has some real issues with women that maybe got exacerbated by fame and power. A lot of these things, a lot of these sex scandals and stuff, they really come about only when people are more famous, because they probably don't have the power. They don't have the you think a lot of times you're thinking about people who spent most of their youth, in a corner typing, just grinding away, trying to become noticed by something, and then get hit by fame in the middle of life. And probably nerds originally on, and then they start to have get attention from women, and then all these things come up. Maybe I'm over analyzing them, but I don't think. Well, Neil Gaiman certainly wouldn't have had the ability to essentially imprison his women and make them almost sex slaves, or make them into essentially sex slaves. Um, but you can read about all that, and you can choose to believe it or not. I choose to believe it because it tracks. Um, but I think that readers, and I want to get back to the parasocial thing. I'll try and wrap it up now. My question is, if readers are selling themselves short, and I don't know what to do about this parasocial thing, where people take it personally, so much what a writer's bad behavior, or criminal behavior in many cases, and only want to read writers that are pristine. Um, I suppose you can find some. You're still at risk though, because you never know what's going to come out later. So, do you give up on writing altogether, or do you only follow artists that in your mind you think could never have done anything? I think probably Neil Gaiman probably threw people for a loop, but my conclusion is that more people need to be doing their shadow work. I think it's a personal issue that people have to work through. So, if they don't want to do it, fine. They can just read something else, or just ignore the issue. But when you've got dark impulses, everyone has dark impulses that they have to integrate into their personality. And if people haven't done that, not to get too Jungian, but if people haven't done that, they're going to have a harder time being confronted with this. They don't want to be seen as endorsing things. I really don't understand why reading Lovecraft means you would be endorsing his views that you don't agree with. There is kind of a social a social media thing where people don't want to be lumped in with a certain group, so they have to condemn, and then the condemnations come in stronger and stronger forms. Pretty soon, you're canceling everybody, J.K. Rowling, because you don't believe in her views. And um, so what do people do? I mean, do they cut themselves off entirely from art because art is made by human beings? Because that's the issue. These are extreme cases. We're talking about Lovecraft or Neil Gaiman or whatever, but everybody's a human being. Everybody's done things that they're less than proud of, I think. If not, let me know. If you've never done anything that you're ashamed of or that you wish you had done different, do you want to be judged by only that, or do you want to have that taken into account when your whole life is assessed? So that's where I land on it. I don't shy away from reading books just because I've read something bad about the author, and I do now more than ever the last few years. I do like to know about the people I'm reading, and I do like to think about how their work informs the work that they did. That's not endorsement. It's not endorsement. I mean, if anybody thinks it is, you're wrong. If you don't want to read anything by a gross person or give money to a gross person, or if you just can't because it destroys your enjoyment, which it might for someone like Neil Gaiman because his books are not really serious, or well, I guess people take them seriously. So if I another big one is P.G. Wodehouse, who did some things during World War II that were not um, that were, as Tim Dillon would say, not good. Um, he was a prisoner of war, and he did some things that were considered collaborations. And I think in that case, he was kind of naive, but and he suffered for it later in life. A. Milne really came down on him for that. I can imagine people did. Having lived through World War II, to hear he did some broadcasts for the Nazis. They were not political broadcasts, but depending on how close you are to that conflict and how close you are to that might destroy your readings of Wodehouse. Sorry if I did that to you, if you didn't know. It is a major thing, and it's dealt with in his biographies now. It's something you have to consider. Does that kill your enjoyment of a writer like Wodehouse, who is so light and frothy and just meant to be pure joy, not something like H.P. Lovecraft, which is really dark and deals with the darker impulses of nature and humanity. So in that sense, it might be easier to deal with someone like Lovecraft, because he's writing about those kind of impulses where Wodehouse is kind of waving them away. He's kind of offering an alternative world to that. Doesn't really affect me that well. If he killed a child, it might have, but everybody has to decide this for themselves. And I think that what's missing is people just not wanting to engage with it. And a lot of times we talk about how does reading make you a better person or not? Maybe I'll do a video on that sometime, because I have a kind of a contrarian view on that. But if you're going to read, I think it's worth engaging with these issues, and whether you decide that, I just can't enjoy this person's work anymore, or now if I'm just going to read it in a different way, knowing these other things about them. I think you do yourself a disservice if you just, I heard this thing, I read this thing, I'm never gonna look at this person's work again, or I feel betrayed or anything. That's just too parasocial in my mind, because the work is one thing that is separate from the artist, even though it's impossible to, as Michael says, it really is impossible to separate what you know about the artist from what you know about what they've written. And it does make the writing richer to find out what kind of what kind of flawed human being did it. Now, in the future, we might not have to worry about this very much longer, because AI might take care of everything, and then we don't have to blame the author, because there will be no authors. There will just be constructs. I don't think that's going to happen, but if it does, then we can all enjoy work that is written by non-humans and don't have any human flaws, and we can just wave away the flaws of the AI by saying it was programmed wrong. So I guess I'll leave it there. Not really a helpful video, but I think it's worth engaging in if people want to put some comments here, or maybe people are going to do other videos. I'll keep watching for them, and I'll think about that other thing about, does reading make you a better person? Because I'm pretty sure writing doesn't make you a better person. I'll leave that as a cliffhanger.